So welcome back, everyone. This is Self Longevity Method Channel. I'm Dr. Sean Hashmi, and I know we've been away for a little while, but the plan is every month on the fourth Friday of each month to go ahead and do this live sort of Q&A. Ask me anything about health and nutrition that you want to know, and this way, all of your questions are able to get answered on once a week. So, with that being the case, what I wanted to talk about today was really 6 important studies that have come out, and I want to make sure that you guys get to hear about all of them. The first one is about multivitamin mineral supplements and brain decline. So let's talk about this is the Cosmos study, and Cosmos study is cocoa supplement and multivitamin outcome study. And essentially what it was showing was that multivitamin supplementation was having a positive effect on brain function. Specifically what it meant was that if you took a daily multivitamin, your overall global cognition, your ability to understand language and to remember things and all sorts of parameters got better. On top of that, things like episodic memory. And what's episodic memory? Essentially stands for, each event being able to remember specific dates, times, and so forth. That got better as well. So what they were talking about was that those who took multivitamins, they had an equivalent of reducing their brain aging by about 2 years. Once again, the equivalent was reducing brain aging by about 2 years. So what does this mean? Well, if you're somebody who's looking to age gracefully and remember things, a multivitamin can actually be helpful when it comes to older adults. And specific benefits are in episodic memory, which is the most common type of memory that occurs as people get older. Now, here's where you want to understand this. A lot of these studies that are looking at multivitamins, the folks that take multivitamins are also trying to do the other things. They're sleeping more, they're moving more, they're practicing gratitude and kindness and working on healthy relationships, and their diet is composed mostly of whole foods. So keep that in mind. If you're thinking this is something magical about multivitamins, it may be just the fact that folks who take more multivitamins also take better care of themselves. But either way, the risk to benefit ratio, in other words, the risk of taking multivitamins is quite low. And if you're somebody who's worried about it, you can take whole food based multivitamins if that's the case of your concern. But more important than just taking multivitamins will always be focusing on sleep, exercise, love, and food. Let's talk about an interesting study. Now, this is still on healthy patients without any evidence of kidney disease or anything else. Let's talk about protein intake and healthy aging. What do you want to know? So, this is coming from the Nurses' Health Study. It's actually quite large. It's 48,762 female nurses. And what this study showed was that higher intakes of protein in midlife was linked to better outcomes later. But here's where it becomes very interesting. For each 3% increase, in other words, 3% of your energy being derived from proteins, for every 3% increase, here's where it becomes very fascinating. With total protein, you're looking at about a 5% improvement in health outcomes. With animal proteins, that number goes up to 7%. With dairy protein, that number goes up to 14%, and with plant proteins, it goes up to 38%. In other words, as you start to think about this, don't forget the power of whole foods and trying to at least have some, if not most, of your protein intake coming from whole foods. Because what it'll translate into is less acid load, easier on your gut, easier on your body, and as a result of it, you're actually getting greater benefits. That's not to say that you can never have whey protein, for example. Yes, you can. You just need to understand that as you're putting all of this together, don't forget to go ahead and back off a little bit from the animal side and increase a little bit on the plant side. And so, as you think about plant based protein, we've talked about in kidney disease how they can play a pretty significant role in reducing the acid load. As we get older, plant based proteins are less acidic and they are adding less to breaking down your bones. So that's a beneficial impact as well. And so as you think about 3% of your energy, just substituting 3% of your total caloric energy from plant proteins, some of the benefits you're seeing are people as they get older, they had better physical function, they had better mental function, and overall healthier aging profile. So once again, longevity is all about the concept of aging gracefully, and this is where it gets interesting. So bottom line, try to see if you can increase plant proteins in your diet, and you don't have to go 100% here at all. A little bit makes a big difference, so it's fine. And remember, adequate protein intake. Now, if you watch YouTube or TikTok, every single person has some random number that they come up with. But the evidence, not my opinion or anybody else's, the evidence for an optimal protein intake is 1.2 to 1.6 grams per kilogram per day. And this is based on ideal body weight for a healthy adult. Of course, if you have chronic kidney disease, that number would be lower. But this is not an opinion based number. This is actually based on the current data. So, a lot of people who are saying a gram per pound, I still have yet to see any strong data that supports that because too much protein, remember, if you're using too much protein, it has to go somewhere. If your muscles can't use it, it's going to convert into fat and it's going to go get filtered through your kidneys. Both areas are going to increase the pressure. Now, for the third study for today, let's dive into plant-based fibers and metabolic health. So, this is specifically on beta glucan and what the benefits of beta glucan are. Beta glucan is fascinating, and what this study showed was that if you supplement with beta glucan in your diet, what you're going to find is that weight goes down and adiposity goes down, overall body weight goes down, your ability to have less insulin resistance improves. Your ability to burn energy all the way at the cellular level, meaning at the level of the mitochondria, gets better. And same thing with overall physical activity is improved. And so what happens is in this particular study, they were measuring basically what's coming out when you go to the bathroom, fecal butyrate, and which is just, it's a really good short chain fatty acid being produced in your gut. So in this study, this is from the Journal of Nutrition back in last year, May 2024, what they found was that beta glucan is absolutely fascinating. So how the heck do you get beta glucan? Well, don't try to supplement with it. What you want to be able to do is add things like, for example, oats. Oats have up to 6% of the total content coming from beta glucan. Barley has significant amounts in it. There is wheat, which is a little bit less, but it's there. You have rye, um, mushrooms, and seaweed. But overall, if you're eating oats, and especially if you're doing that as part of your daily regimen in terms of breakfast and so forth, you're getting plenty of beta glucan in your diet. And what's fascinating about beta glucan is what it's going to end up doing is it's going to shift the gut microbiome, the bacteria in there, towards a much more healthier composition. And you're going to see that it's going to help to increase the production of short chain fatty acids, which ends up being quite important to your overall health. And at the end of the day, all of these things translate into better overall health markers in your gut microbiome. I see Danilo said hi, waving hi right back. D. Dutton came on, has a question, so we'll get to it in 2 seconds. But let's go on to the next study. This study is going to talk about bioactive compounds in chronic kidney disease. So let's focus on some of the individual compounds and what makes them so good for you. Curcumin, we've talked about this a lot. There are 8 randomized clinical trials that I looked at. And essentially, where curcumin becomes so important is we already know it's wonderful, it's anti inflammatory benefits, it's got antioxidant properties. When it comes to gut microbiome, it's awesome. It reduces all sorts of inflammatory markers. There are lots of ways to do it. You can use turmeric as a spice, so you can cook with it. A lot of the Southeast Asian cultures use turmeric on a daily basis. For me, I end up using it as a tea, and so I have my turmeric or curcumin and ginger tea. It's fantastic. Personally, I find that it relaxes me and helps me sleep better at night. So I do that or chamomile tea, but I found that turmeric and ginger is a really interesting thing. As some of you guys know, I have migraine slash seizures. They still can't figure out what it is. And I do all sorts of things to work on stress management, relaxation, and it makes a difference. And I see Tyrone is saying hi. Hi, Tyrone. And let's see, Jeanette is saying good evening, everyone. Hi, Jeanette. Lynn is saying hello. Hi, Lynn. Glad to see everybody over here. Now, let's go to the next one in terms of our bioactive compounds for CKD. The next one is propolis. And I looked at 3 randomized control studies. And what was fascinating about this was it's got renal protective properties. Specifically, you'll see that it can lower protein in the urine, looking at things like curcumin and turmeric, same anti-inflammatory benefits. Next one is sulforaphane. You've probably heard about it from broccoli and so forth. Sulforaphane is a little bit mixed evidence, so don't go crazy. The fiber part of it, when it comes from broccoli, is awesome, but sulforaphane is interesting because it may be good for cardiovascular health. Remember, the number one cause of death with chronic kidney disease is the heart. And doing anything to protect the heart, such as eating broccoli or essentially non-starchy vegetables, is great. The other one is allicin from garlic. 2 randomized control studies that I found very good once again for cardioprotective effects. If you have kidney disease, this matters. Antioxidant benefits. Remember, antioxidants are going to go around and mop up all of the inflammatory molecules, so they become great. Lipid lowering benefits. Kidney disease always ends up having elevated amounts of lipids in the body, and this makes a difference because those lipids, especially the LDL particles, those small dense particles will end up going and depositing in your blood vessels. So another reason why this becomes very important. All right, next study. This one is all about physical activity and nutrition. So I'm working on a lecture right now that I'll be giving at several of the conferences this year, specifically on the optimal approach to CKD or chronic kidney disease. And we're going to talk about sleep, the data behind it, and all of the factors around it, exercise, the stress component, the social connections, and of course, from the food perspective. So I'll keep you guys posted as I'm coming and presenting at a lot of the upcoming conferences this year. But when it comes to this particular study, what they were talking about was the better your cardiorespiratory fitness, the lower the risk of CKD progression. In other words, the more you can start to have regular exercise, it doesn't matter what you do. Don't make it complicated. If all you can do is walk, make that a non negotiable. Say every single day, I'm going to focus on walking. Great, make it happen. What they found was that just the folks that were exercising, all of their parameters for having a heart attack in chronic kidney disease went down. And all of them were able to be far more functional if all they did was just focus on a little bit of exercise. And then from dietary patterns, just remember, everything begins with a whole food, plant-based diet, and then you add stuff to it like you wish. So a Mediterranean diet at its base is a whole food, plant-based diet. A DASH diet is a plant-based diet. So as this study talked about, all of the things that they were really focusing was how can you incorporate more fruits, more vegetables, more whole grains, essentially more plant-based foods, and that would translate into better long-term health outcomes. On the flip side, the more you limited salt, the more you limited sugar, the more you limited saturated fat coming from red meat and etc. And of course, all of your ultra processed foods. And if you're listening to this, just remember all your alternative sweeteners, the Splendas, the stevias, the monk fruit, the sugar alcohols, and now they're coming up with all sorts of designer sugar alternatives. None of those guys are good for your overall health. It's one of those things where if we haven't learned the lesson from going from cigarettes to vaping and finding out that vaping wasn't necessarily a healthier alternative. So as you go from one bad thing to another bad thing, I get what people are trying to do, but if you keep stepping into the bar every single day and you're hoping that you're not going to drink the alcohol, you're making it way harder for yourself. Sugar is addictive, and if you keep going to sugar or finding sugar alternatives, remember the stevias, splendas, monk fruit, they are 400 to 600 times sweeter than sugar. So if you crave sugar, how are you ever going to get over your cravings or your addiction if you're taking something that's far sweeter than sugar? Now, flipping things around a little bit, there's a lot of conversations, and if you've been watching any of my videos for a while, you know I emphasize whole foods and specifically higher potassium in them for CKD1, CKD2. When you get to CKD3, especially chronic kidney disease stage 3B, we worry more about potassium retention. Any stage of kidney disease, you have to make sure that your nephrologist is watching your potassium levels. But potassium levels, the more fruits and vegetables you end up eating, the more you'll find your blood pressure goes down. Once again, higher potassium, lower the blood pressure, better the kidney outcomes. You increase potassium, your risk of kidney disease outcomes goes down. Now, for everyone wondering, well, what if I have advanced CKD? Then makes sense. You have to watch your potassium levels because if potassium is too high, it will kill you. If potassium is too low, it will also kill you. So you have to get it just right in the middle. So that's why it matters. But the more you're able to substitute salt for potassium rich foods and potassium shakers and so forth, you'll find, especially early on in the game, that there are so many benefits. So, salt substitutes, if you're thinking about them and they have potassium, but once again, advanced kidney disease, stage 3, 4, 5, or dialysis, potassium becomes very dangerous and you need to monitor it. Now, the last study that I wanted to go over with you guys today, this one is really interesting for me because I haven't heard too many people talk about this ever. So, this is about chrono-nutrition in chronic kidney disease. Chrono-nutrition is a very simple term, and what it is essentially you're trying to align when you eat with your circadian rhythm. And this matters even more in chronic kidney disease than we previously thought. So, when you talk about your metabolic health, remember the three biggest causes of chronic kidney disease is diabetes, is high blood pressure, and overlying all of those is excess weight or suffering from the disease of obesity. So, if you're dealing with three, chrononutrition actually makes a whole lot of sense. And what it does is by aligning to your circadian rhythm, you will actually find that your kidney clock genes, they actually get restored. The gut microbiome gets restored. You're making less toxins from your gut that are going in your body that are then damaging your body. So all of those things are improving simply because your timing is changing. So for example, we talk a lot about time restricted eating. Specifically, we've talked about the idea of eating for 6 to 10 hours and fasting the rest. But when you talk about that eating window, the optimal time is when the sun is up. When the sun is up, that's when you want to focus on eating. And what you find is if you align your eating with your circadian rhythm, your ability to digest food, your metabolic activity actually improves. And what ends up translating as a result of it is your overall inflammation in the body goes down. So, what does it mean for actual actionable items that you can take with you? Very simple stuff. Avoid eating late at night. It's very simple. Try to stop eating 4 hours before bedtime if you can. Now, clearly, if you're on insulin or other things, you won't be able to. Understood. Always talk to your doctor, always, before you start anything, and listen to anybody on the internet, including myself. Always double check. So, Avoid late night dinners. The first couple of weeks, your stomach is gurgling and all that stuff, but after that, you will find that your sleep is deeper. You will wake up more refreshed. When you sleep, just having eaten, you spend more time trying to digest that food. So as a result, blood is going towards your stomach. You're not getting that deep, restful sleep that you deserve. And it matters. Other things, breakfast. There's all sorts of conversations about breakfast. Should you eat it? Should you not? A lot of people like, I never eat breakfast. I fast starting at 2 p.m. and blah, blah, blah. Here's the thing about breakfast. What breakfast does is it's like a pyramid. Your biggest meal should be earlier in the day. Your smallest meal should be later in the day. Once again, chrono-nutrition is timing so that when the sun is up, you are timing your biological eating, your metabolism according to the sun. You wake up in the morning because your metabolism is revving up, because your energy is revving up. When the evening rolls around, your body starts to slow down. It's preparing itself for rest. So, eating a big meal when it's preparing itself for rest just logically doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And just to say hi to Karen out there, hi Linda, thanks so much for joining, guys. All right, other things you want to know is meal frequency makes a whole lot of difference. In other words, the optimal number of meals per day is 2 to 3. And if you're eating snacks, it counts as a meal. There's a lot of people that feel eating every 2 to 3 hours is important. The only time that we do that clinically is where we have folks that are older, where they really can't eat a lot. So we'll tell them eat more often because eating more often stimulates your appetite. One more time, eating more often will actually make you hungrier. So if you're somebody who's trying to get healthy, control your cravings, go down to 2 to 3. Why not one meal a day or OMAD? The reason that I don't recommend OMAD is because it's very hard to get the diversity of nutrients in one single meal. Not saying it can't be done, it just makes it very hard. Number two is, remember, you're trying to feed the healthy bacteria in your gut with all sorts of rich foods, with all those beautiful phytonutrients, the antioxidants, and that takes time. So it's hard to get all the colors of the rainbow in one single meal. If you can do it, more power to you. But having been doing this, what, gosh, 25 years now, I can tell you, for the mere mortals out there, it's actually very difficult to do. All right, other things. Some of the stuff that you want to know about is when you're thinking about consuming protein. Remember, when you're going to be doing activity, before and after, or after is fine. Because if you time your protein intakes around the time where your body is going to want it, the protein is less likely to just be filtered out. There's a reason for your body to use it. So if you're going to go work out, eat protein. When you finish your workout, eat some protein. And something to just remember is a lot of people like to drink protein shakes, and I'm just as guilty as everyone else. But there's something very beautiful about chewing your food. Once again, you want your digestive tract to work. You want your intestines to work. When you have your stomach, your intestines doing the work, and your mouth working, it actually helps you to start to engage the brain gut connection so you know when you're full. You start to realize. And, in the Japanese Okinawan culture, you'll see there's this concept of eating to 80% fullness. How the heck do you know you're 80% full? It's very simple. Don't feel full. Don't eat to fullness. That's it. That's the entire concept of 80%. It's not, you don't have to be exactly 80%, but that's the concept behind it. All right, so 6 topics today that we've talked about that hopefully will help you from a longevity perspective and a chronic kidney disease perspective. The next part for the next few minutes is really about any questions you guys have. Pop them into the chat. I'm going to scroll here. And if you're wondering, what the heck am I doing sitting in my car and doing this? It's because my 2 daughters, Celine and Faith, are inside. They're doing their wrestling practice. There's a big wrestling tournament coming up. It's actually next week and weekend. They're going to be going there, and then I got to come back and take care of my own parents. So long story short, that's why I'm sitting in the car, is because of the fact that I try as best as I can to be a part of my kid's life. All right. So D. Dutton had a question. DHA has COX-2 inhibition activity. So how many milligrams is safe for CKD3? Thanks for the Omega Complete Guide 3 weeks ago. So this is a challenging question because of the fact that omega-3s, when we talk about them, there's cardiac protection that's secondary benefit. In other words, they weren't able to see that it prevented the first heart attack, but taking fish oil after may prevent the second heart attack. So it matters from a fish oil perspective. And of course, there's algae as well. So don't think it just has to be animal based. But the second part of this is from a brain health perspective, there's really good data. The data is tricky when it comes to the DHA EPA ratio because depending on the disease condition, some diseases have more DHA requirement, others have more EPA. The total combination of DHA and EPA recommended is 1 gram, not 1 gram of fish oil, 1 gram of specifically omega-3, DHA and EPA. And the quality of fish oil or omega-3s or algae oil, whatever it is that you're doing, the quality really matters because a lot of the cheap brands on the internet, the problem is the omega-3s that you're getting might already be gone bad. The quality isn't there. They're not independently tested. So there could be all sorts of heavy metals. So if you're looking for fish oil, if it's third party tested, that makes the biggest difference as you're thinking about it. All right, let's look for other questions. Let's see. SGLT2 contributes to reabsorbing 90% of the filtered glucose. No. SGLT2 inhibitors will prevent the glucose from being reabsorbed. So yes, and it's me reading it incorrectly on the small little iPhone thingy. So reabsorbing filtered glucose, amino acids, vitamins. Do SGLT2 inhibitors cause more amino acids and vitamins to pass into the urine? No, they do not. Because of the fact that when you take food, remember the point of taking vitamins is what your body needs, it will go ahead and use it right away. What your body doesn't need is what's filtering through the kidneys. So you don't worry about that. SGLT2s have become a standard of care in terms of using it for kidney disease. They're great in diabetes. They cause some weight loss, which is awesome. They're great for cardiovascular protection. So if you're thinking about SGLT2 inhibitors, don't forget they're actually very powerful, and you should definitely consider them, or your physician should consider them if you're dealing with diabetes, you're dealing with kidney disease, or you're dealing with cardiovascular issue. In all three cases, SGLT2 inhibitors have shown to be very, very successful. They're not without problems because if you're peeing out sugar and you're not careful, if you try to hold your pee, you don't go to the restroom often enough, you can get urinary tract infections, both bacterial and fungal. And as you know, fungal can be really, really nasty. They can be very serious and very difficult to treat. All right, let's see if there's any other questions. I don't think there's any more questions. So, as always, I just want to thank you guys so much for your support. As you know, on this channel, I'm trying to make sure you get data around general health and wellness, as well as chronic kidney disease. If this stuff is good for you, please, I would love it if you, subscribe to the channel, share it with other folks, and any questions or any ideas for future topics, you can always just put them in any of the comments, and I'll make sure they're there. And Lynn said her GFR is 71, and she's 65-year-old diabetic female. So 71 is a phenomenal GFR, Lynn. Great job as far as that goes. And keep it up. And once again, remember, it's the small steps. I read this somewhere, and I apologize to the author who said it, but I told this to my daughters. When you plant a seed in the ground and then you walk away and you come back the next day or the next week, nothing shows up, nothing. And so you say, look, what's the point of planting a seed? And then weeks go by, and before you know it, there's a little bud, and then it blossoms. And next thing you know, you have this beautiful tree, and it's got all sorts of fruits on it. But it all started with that seed, and all that work it did under the ground that nobody ever saw. It had to do that work to break through. So for people like Lynn who are doing amazing work, Lynn, keep it up. Remember, at the end of the day, every little bit counts. And just because nobody else, including yourself, sees that progress, it doesn't mean that seed isn't growing. It means the seed is growing. It just hasn't shown the progress yet. So, congratulations, everybody, on the great work you're all doing. My non negotiable is walking, and I make sure, in addition to doing rowing, I think rowing is the single best exercise you can do. On top of that, I always try to walk every single day because I'll put in my little headphones, I'll go listen to a book. And if you ever want to learn a lot, go to your library, get the library card, go on the Libby app. Phenomenal way to read hundreds of books and learn a ton. And never stop learning. And more importantly, never stop being kind. Kindness is the most underrated thing we can do, especially in today's day and age. Being kind, expressing gratitude, and just being a better person for everyone is a rare trait, but it's one that we all need. So, with that, thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful, blessed weekend. I will see you guys next month, but every week you will see a new topic, both around kidneys as well as general health and longevity. Thank you, everybody. Take care. I'll see you guys soon. Bye bye.